and welcome to the What Caregivers Need to Know video show by eCareDiary.com. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Susan Baida, the co-founder of eCareDiary and host of this show. We're very excited to be talking about getting the best hospital care for your loved one. It's often a daunting experience to take your loved one to a hospital and care for them once they're in the hospital. And Bonnie has written a tremendous book, which we'll talk about in a moment. We're very excited to have her here with us today. Her name is Bonnie Friedman. She's the author of the new book, Hospital Warrior: How to Get the Best Care for Your Loved One. She is a passionate crusader for getting the best hospital care for loved ones. Her zeal stems from 24 plus years of experience advocating for her husband, Bob, through the course of 14 separate hospitalizations, some very serious and life-threatening. Bob is fortunately now thriving, and I imagine has a lot to do with you.
Well, I hope I played a role in that.
And Bonnie is turning her hard-won knowledge into information to share with others, like yourselves, I imagine, going through the hospital experience, and to help them advocate on behalf of their loved ones. Her practical advice is valuable for all who have loved ones in the hospital or might someday. So even if you don't have someone who's needing hospital care, it might be a very good idea for you to read this book. Before she became a hospital warrior, Bonnie was a professional communicator with more than 40 years of experience working in the federal government and then owning her own consulting business. She started her career at the National Institutes of Health. My goodness, so you have a lot of background knowledge here.
Well, I've come full circle.
Yeah. And so she has now come full circle in the health-related communications. Bonnie and her husband, Bob, live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and just outside of Washington, D.C. But Bonnie is originally from Pittsburgh, from our area, which is where we're doing the show now. She was born here, and she grew up in McKeesport, and she has family in the area and comes back very regularly, which we're very lucky to have you here on one of your visits.
Thank you.
So if you want more information about Bonnie and her book, visit www.hospitalwarrior.com. So Bonnie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
It's so good to meet you in person, and we want to get started by asking you, we know a little bit why you might have been motivated to write this book, but tell us a little bit about the background.
When Bob was hospitalized for the first time, and it's now 26 years ago, I really had very little idea of what he would be up against and what I would need to learn to know and do to help him. Hospitals are complicated places, and with each passing hospitalization that he went through, I found there was more I needed to learn, more I needed to do. This isn't information that we collect all at one time in our heads. When you're living it and learning it, you're building it block by block, and it becomes experiential. What you do is what you learn, and what you learn is what you do. Mm-hmm. So I found over the years that I was accumulating more and more. And at some point, I felt really a passionate need to share all that I had learned because I wanted to pass it on and help others.
Yes. Can you share with us a little bit about what brought Bob to the hospital?
He had a number of illnesses. I think they fall into two basic categories. One is cardiovascular. So he had a heart attack. At another time, he needed bypass surgery and so on. He also had a series of very life-threatening staph infections. These were not acquired in the hospital, like we learned so much about, but rather something he became susceptible to, and it recurred. And with each recurrence, it became even more and more serious and more life-threatening. So that was a bit of an unusual series of events, but the cardiovascular events, unfortunately, are ones that many people experience today.
Yes, they do. It's one of the
Leading causes, yes,
Yes.
of illness and death.
Yes. So your book is full of great educational information for anyone going through the experience of caring for someone who's in the hospital or overseeing their care. What are some of the most important things that you learned about your experience? I mean, I imagine you learned so many, but for the purposes of our show, maybe some of the top 3 things that you learned that you'd like to share.
I think the 3 most important things that I learned, and I hope come across in the book, are number 1, you have to take care of yourself. And in fact, that is the first chapter in the book. If you aren't caring for yourself, you can't care for anyone else. And I really hope that all of your viewers take that message to heart. Please take care of yourselves. You will do yourself no good, and equally important, do your loved one no good if you become ill.
True.
Number 2, understand that hospitals are very complicated, complex places, and medicine is very fragmented, and the hospital environment is often very difficult to navigate. So you need to appreciate the complexity of all of this and understand it's getting more complicated with time. It's fragmented and sometimes seems disconnected. That's not to say that you need to go and get a medical degree, but you do need to understand a little bit about the hospital structure in order to be effective as an advocate. And number 3, and I think this one is perhaps even more important than number 1. Number 3 is find your voice and use it. You have a very important role in the care for your loved one. You know that person better than anyone else in the hospital, and that counts for a lot in getting the best possible care.
One of the things that I honed in on in your book, which I knew, but I imagine I knew it because I've been through hospitals quite a few times with my own family. But you talk about the different types of hospitals there are out there. And would you mind sharing that with our audience? Because I thought that that was really quite key in understanding the level of service or
Sure.
differences.
Basically, they fall into 3 important categories. One is the specialty hospital, and that's a hospital that perhaps treats women and women's particular illnesses. Or maybe you have a hospital that specializes in cancer care or rehabilitation service. Those are very focused hospitals, and they provide excellent specialized care, but they don't necessarily provide general care. That leads to the second kind of hospital, and that is the general hospital, the one that can provide the full breadth of service that is needed for the patient. And the third is the teaching hospital. It's affiliated with a medical school or perhaps a nursing school as well. And part of the operation of the hospital is also the education of the students. So patients are seen not only by the attending physician, but by the fellows and the residents and the interns and the medical students as well. There are pluses and minuses to the teaching hospital. For one thing, on the plus side, they're usually cutting edge. They are at the forefront often of the most advanced medical care. But you have to understand the balance that goes with that. You're going to be seen by different doctors at different levels, and although there's an attending overseeing it all, there are a lot of players and a lot of levels of expertise that they bring as they're learning to become doctors.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful, actually, for me too. So let me ask you about the book now, and Who is this book intended for? I mean, what if someone doesn't have someone who doesn't need the hospital right now, or should this be something that they should read in advance?
Well, I like to think that the book can work on two different levels. One is the fire drill, fire prevention. Read it in advance and be prepared. The other is a guidebook for when you're going through the experience.
Yeah, great. Yes, and if you're caring for someone who has some chronic illness, you know eventually at some point they're going to need to be in the hospital. So
Most likely, unfortunately so.
yeah, so I should definitely read it. Well, thank you, Bonnie, so much for coming out here and joining us today here in Pittsburgh. And thank you to our audience. Let us know your thoughts and your comments on our website. We appreciate it. Until next time, bye-bye.